Hola, everybody. Buenas tardes, buenas noches, buenos días, wherever you're coming from. Welcome to En Casa con la Plaza de Cultura y Artes virtual programming taking place during these uncertain times, bringing you conversations, presentations, demonstrations, performances from our home to yours. We're on Facebook Live, we're on Zoom, we're everywhere. If you can, share what you're watching on your personal page. If you're on Facebook Live, you can comment, or Zoom, comment, wave, ask a question. Let us know where you're coming from. Start a watch party, of course. Keep in touch. We make this interactive. And this is a very interactive presentation for you today, very special. Talking about something that happened at La Plaza, an exhibit that we opened up on February 22nd, that was only open for 3 weeks before we had to close down along with everybody else. And our program today is called When Community Creates Exhibitions, the making of afroLAtinidad, Mi Casa, My City. And to just give you a little taste of what this exhibition is about, I'm going to play for you our opening reception. And I think you're going to really enjoy it, get you in the mood. So here goes. As you can see, it was a great time. A beautiful exhibit, a wonderful reception. We saw people that had never come to La Plaza before because of the content, because of just what we were trying to do with our exhibit here, to showcase a community that has been semi-hidden, but has been part of the Los Angeles landscape for a long time. To lead us into this conversation, this panel discussion, I'd like to introduce you to the exhibition's curator, Mariah Berlanga-Shevchuk, who will take it from here. Go for it, Mariah.
Awesome. Thank you, Abelardo. Hi, everyone. I'm coming to you live from Portland, Oregon. I no longer work at La Plaza, but happy to be here. Very excited to be sharing about afroLAtinidad, Mi Casa, My City. You might have seen from some of the program descriptions that this is an exhibition that was 2 years in the making, and as the program title says, it was created by a whole community. And so we're gonna dive into that tonight, and along with me speaking, we have one of our advisors from our community committee, Mikia Castillo. We have Janelle Hartley, who is one of our community lenders, and we have Esperanza Sanchez, who's associate curator at La Plaza and was project manager and assistant curator on this exhibition. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you all for tuning in to hear about how this exhibition came to be. So I'm just gonna give you a bit of background about how the exhibition came to be. I actually pitched a show about the afroLAtinx community in my interview with La Plaza in late 2017. So when I began in early 2018, I immediately started researching this topic, and I pitched this show because I identify as multi-ethnic, but I'm not Afro-Latinx, and I felt that the museum had not yet explored an exhibition dedicated solely to the Black community. And so it felt to me like it was overdue, and it tied in really nicely with a mission expansion from La Plaza that pretty much happened right when I started, that expanding the mission from a Mexican and Mexican-American museum to include all of Latinx life in Los Angeles. So of course that meant that we needed to talk about the Afro-Latinx community in LA. And when I began my research, I noticed that there weren't very many collections in Los Angeles that had objects or materials from this cultural group. And that was shocking to me because Los Angeles was actually founded by Afro-Latinos. The founding pobladores were of mixed ancestry and identified in various, or were identified in various ways that indicated they had African heritage. And so that's something that really doesn't get talked about in LA discourse. And so we wanted to kind of right a little bit of that wrong and provide an overview of what life might be like historically and contemporarily for the Afro-Latinx community in LA. So we talk about both folks who are Black Latinos, and we talk about folks who are mixed. They might have one parent who's Mexican American and one parent who's African American. They all fall under the Afro-Latinx umbrella that we use in this show. And so, yeah, so we used a lot of, we built a lot of community in creating this exhibition. We partnered with 7 advisors. Lamika is one of them. So 7 advisors who range from being academics to artists to dancers, choreographers, DJs. We have kind of the whole mix in this advisory committee, and everyone was either Black, Afro-Latinx, or mixed in their own way. And so the advisory committee really brought a lot of their lived experiences to the show. They brought their connections to folks who might loan us objects for the show, etc. And so taking it back, in spring 2018, when I started at La Plaza, like I said, I didn't find many collections in museums or in archives in Los Angeles that had a lot of Afro-Latinx materials. And so we decided, based on a previous show at La Plaza, Peloteros in Paradise, a Los Angeles baseball story, where the curator of that exhibition, Aaron Curtis, partnered with the Smithsonian National Museum of American History to do an object drive, where we would ask members of the community to come to La Plaza and bring their objects and tell us their stories. And some of them made it into the show. And then from there, some of them went on to be collected by the Smithsonian. So we wanted to replicate that process for this exhibition. And we also partnered with Cal State LA Special Collections so that the objects would have the opportunity to stay local should the lenders decide to donate them. And so we had 3 community collection days over the course of 2019, and they ended up not yielding any lenders until the very last one, which kind of just goes to show that we were really spreading the word and trying to build community all along the way. And then in late 2018, as I was assembling our advisory committee, we also hired Walter Thompson Hernandez, a local Afro-Latinx author, journalist, and now podcast host with LAist. And so he came onto the team as co-curator and really lead advisor. And it was his idea to make the exhibition into a home. So we have him to thank for that. And you should check out his new podcast. It's called California Love. It's all about growing up in LA and at the intersection of brown and Black identities. Let's see. And just to keep walking you through the process. So we had about 6 advisory meetings over the course of the year. In those meetings, we talked about what kinds of objects might be on display, what specific stories need to be told, what histories and like cultural groups in particular should be called out. They recommended art and artists and ultimately reviewed the text and really helped actually shape the words that you read, the colors that are on the wall, the objects that are included, the artwork that's included, all of that passed through a committee that really helped shape it into what it is. And then in the summer of 2019, we started working very closely with our designer, Aviva Rubin. We had a Getty research assistant, Ansley Browning, a Cal State Long Beach student. And so we started working together as a team really intensely. And then in the fall winter of 2019, Esperanza and I were driving all across LA County, picking up objects, going into folks' homes, and were welcomed so lovingly to come in and select what we wanted off of shelves. It was it had a feeling of community entirely throughout it. And then in winter of 2019, I moved to Portland. And so Esperanza and Aviva did an amazing, amazing job installing the exhibition, making it as interactive and as welcoming and as friendly as it is. I hope that some of you on this panel or on this call got to go in and see it in the 3 weeks that it was open. But as we all know, the coronavirus pandemic shut everything down in March, just 3 weeks after the exhibition opened. So that's the timeline of how the exhibition came to be. And I'm gonna turn it over to Esperanza, Associate Curator at La Plaza, to talk about how La Plaza engages with history. And just as an FYI, we forgot to mention it earlier, there will be a video walkthrough of the exhibition. For those of you who were not able to see it in person, there's a little video walkthrough at the end, so you'll get to see the feel of the gallery, the home that I'm mentioning, and all of that good stuff. So Esperanza, please.
Hi, so thank you, Mariah. It was a pleasure to work on this exhibition, and even more working at La Plaza, because we do dive into the history that is not only our culture, but of all Latinx in Southern California. And it's something that we've expanded on, as Mariah mentioned in the mission statement. So yes, when Mariah left in the winter of 2019, I was the only curator left. We already had a very small staff. But either way, though, we ended up working with Aviva, also our preps, and also even a couple of staff members at La Plaza would help me as well with the installation and with the objects. So it was very exciting to get this installation going and try to do it within 6 weeks, which was already a very tight timeline. And then, you know, with staff changes even further, but it was very community oriented, not only the exhibition, but also even very community oriented to making sure that the show would open on time, which is what we were very excited about. Another thing is, I do want to mention that La Plaza is actively trying to extend these loans as well. So we're hoping to also, you know, have availability for people to see it once we open the museum. Of course, with COVID-19, we're unsure when that would happen, but we are definitely trying to do that, and especially with our new senior curator, Karen, who's working on that as well. So yes, it was a very exciting moment. We did pick up a lot of objects. Also, as Mariah mentioned, this exhibition is very home feeling towards it as well. So all the installations that are in there, which now with COVID-19 is a little bit harder, you know, to deal with, but in many ways, we wanted people to see the home aspect. And one of the pleasures about this is that you're walking into a space where it's a kitchen, then a hallway, then a bedroom, then another hallway and a backyard. So it's very immersive. You feel like you're in a space that you are not only comfortable, but you can also imagine living in, and it reflects on people's homes as well. And at the same time, we're also telling the story and this history about Afro-Latinos or Afro-Latinx, excuse me, within the community. And so, as Mariah mentioned, you know, we had all these collections drives, and the very last one, that's where we got the most out of everyone, right? Everyone came in, felt comfortable sharing their stories. And one of the hardships about this, as well as Mariah mentioned, is that these objects are not being collected, and a lot of people are not donating them because they didn't realize that, oh, by the way, a doll that my grandmother made, or a dress that my grandmother made, or even a little religious book that my grandmother gave me, that's important, and that's something that tells the story. And of course, a very objects that are not only personal, but objects that you assume that everyone has an everyday use, but because they're not being collected, it tells a story. And it's not only a visual object that reflects that, but it is also demonstrating a history and providing a narrative that we need. So it's always incredible to do that. Another thing that I do want to mention is we had Aviva, who is an incredible exhibition designer, has vast experience, and I believe this was her first show when she came in Los Angeles, and she was really into it. I mean, the design was incredible, the timeline that we were able to do, even, you know, buying cabinets, she was able to develop this idea of having objects installed in them, things that you wouldn't even think of. You would think, oh, we just put clothes in it. You actually had objects, whether it was jewelry, makeup, products for your hair, or other installations as well, which is really exciting. But all of that, it was just incredible, and I enjoyed it, and I hope that once we're open, and of course with this video walkthrough, you'll get a chance to see it, but I hope that when people do get to see it in person, they'll really feel comfortable and want to come back to La Plaza and not only see the history that we've done there, but feel more comfortable in sharing their stories as well, because that's what we care about, and that's what the institution is about.
Thank you, Esperanza. Yeah, so as history curators at La Plaza, we have a practice of always assembling an advisory committee, like I mentioned earlier, for any history show, and especially for a show about like the Black experience. we knew that there was no way that we were going to create a show about Black people without including them. Duh. And so to that end, Mikia Castillo was actually one of the first advisors that we brought in. I saw her speak at the Immigrant March, and you spoke in Spanish and then you spoke in English, and I was like, that I have to know her. I have to have her on this committee. She's brilliant. And Mikia contributed so much, was so involved. You are the star advisor of this exhibition. Providing so much history and rich lived experience perspective that really helped make the show authentic, which is always what we were going for. So Mikia, can you please share what your experience with this exhibition was like?
Yes, thank you, Mariah, for that introduction. Hi, everybody. I'm really honored to be joining you for this conversation. And I just have to give a couple caveats here, because literally as soon as Mariah said that it was my turn to speak, one of my neighbors decided to have a party outside, cue up the music, and true afro-Latinidad, you know, like get some good music going in Spanish. So that may be playing in the background while I speak. And then also I'm a mother to a 9-month-old, and it is his bedtime. And so he is wrestling with sleep, or not going to sleep right now because I'm not with him. So just wanted to give you that heads up in case you hear him in the background. But yes, I was so honored to be invited to participate as an advisor. This is my first experience as an advisor to an exhibit. And I mean, first of all, how many people have the opportunity to do that? That just blew my mind. And then I was so thrilled about the opportunity to be able to help shape this exhibit, because it's so much of who I am. It's like literally who I am. It's my identity, it's my culture, it's my family, it's my heritage, it's my history. It's also what I do in my profession. I am a professor, and I teach a course on Black, Latino, and Latin American relations at Cal State LA. I also teach policy at USC. I teach urban planning. And so this mixture, this combination of like history, and then how, you know, how history has shaped certain communities is a big part of who I am and what I've chosen to spend my time in my life. I also do diversity, equity, inclusion consulting. And so it's like literally like everything about this exhibit was like me. And so I was really honored. So just a little bit about my family's background. My family, on my dad's side of the family is from Panama. And so I have my grandparents immigrated here, I guess in the 70s or so. And my mom's side of the family is from the US, right? And so I was born and raised in Los Angeles. And some of my friends like to joke that we're South Central Los Angelenos, because we grew up in South Central, right? And are very proud of our like growing up here in LA. So many of my friends are from Central America, like, you know, like my family, because the part of town that I grew up in is, and where I live actually is predominantly Central American folks. But despite being like in a community where people come from countries that are in the same geographic area, being a Black woman who is also Latina definitely meant that I had some unique experiences growing up in LA, right? Because they're not actually, there are a lot of Afro-Latinos in LA, but there actually are not compared to like New York and Florida, right? Places where you think like, oh, Boricua, my husband's Puerto Rican, so I have to give a shout out. Right? You think of Dominicans, you think of Cubans, and you think of those folks not being in LA. You think of them being in Florida, you think of them being in New York, even in Boston. I feel like people sometimes think, you know, all right, oh, there's a lot of Dominicans there. So in LA, people have always been confused. They're like, wait, I don't understand. You speak Spanish? Where did you learn Spanish? I thought you were Black, right? And I'm like, I am Black. Wait, but you speak Spanish? I do speak Spanish. Where did you learn Spanish? You know, from my abuela. Like, so it's been an interesting journey navigating this identity that really is not actually very unique, but it feels unique to LA, right? So I know through my research and studies, and just as a person who teaches in this field, that while most people, you know, when you think of Black folks, you think America and you think maybe Africa, right? Like, oh, obviously there are Africans in Africa, and then in the US, we know this very truncated history of Black people in America coming in as enslaved people. But what so many people don't know is that, one, that's not the beginning story of Black people in America. So we definitely want to talk about that at some point. That's not for this conversation. And two, the majority of Africans who came to the America through the transatlantic slave trade actually did not come to the US, right? There were 13 million Africans who were brought over into the Americas. 12.5 million of those went to South and Central America, right? So that means less than a million, 500,000, 450 to 500,000 came here to the US. Now, I'm not trying to diminish, right, the number of people who came here to the US. I'm just pointing out the fact that Black folks in the Americas are expansive. And like most of the Black folks in the Americas are actually not in the US, which means that most of the Black folks in the Americas are actually in Latin America, right? So this idea that like Black is different than a Latino, or Latinos are not, don't have this African heritage is really a myth. And I wanted to be able to play a role in helping to demystify that. So I really thoroughly enjoyed being a part of this process. My family and I I shouldn't say donate. I don't know if we've donated yet, but we definitely have lended several items to the museum, including some family photos, some artifacts from our grandparents, great-grandparents, that we were happy to put on display so people could actually see, like, this is what the home, like, la casa, like, of a Afro-Latino family feels like. This is what it looks like to be a person who, to the world, they see a Black woman, which I am very proud of and want the world to see. But also there's like these other parts of my identity that people don't assume when they look at my face, but that definitely have shaped who I am and shaped my family and shaped my community and shaped my baby and this fun music that we're hearing outside. So with that, I know we're gonna have Q&A later. I really would love to share more with you all if you have questions, but I'm gonna turn it back over to Mariah because I wanna hear from Janelle.
Awesome, thank you, Lamika. Just to elaborate on that a little bit, the idea of the home was so key to Walter and to the advisory committee because exactly like what Lamika is saying, so often in LA, when a Black Latino leaves their home, they're read as African American or assumed like to not be able to speak Spanish or that you can't be Latino. And when you're in the home, that's where you are the safest to express all parts of your identities, whether they conflict with one another, even though that too is a myth. That's where you're safest to speak Spanish or listen to the type of music that you like, whether it's stereotypically Black or stereotypically Latinx. So the home became a very important theme in this exhibition. And what Lamika did not mention was that she was the star advisor who came to every community collection day, I'm pretty sure. You came to every one. And Janelle did not come to us through a community collection day, but she did come to us through direct outreach. And so Janelle, turn it over to you. Can you just share what your experiences have been like with this exhibition?
Thank you so much, Mariah. Welcome, mis queretanos, ¿cómo están? I am so excited to be here. So I came directly, Abelardo and I did outreach and education when the Affordable Care Act launched. And we were specifically targeting Latinos and Afro-American, African-American communities. It was really exciting for me to contribute because I was actually the opposite. I was born in Mexico. I was born and raised in Querétaro, Mexico. And growing up in Mexico as a Afro-Latina, you're like, who are you? And all the time people will walk up to me and touch my hair and be like, where'd you come from? Because where I was from in Querétaro, you didn't see people of color. You saw las indígenas, or kind of the darker with straight hair Mexican, but you didn't see people like me. So everywhere we went, we stood out. And so it was, growing up, going to school in Mexico, my entire family being Mexican, it was a culture shock coming into the United States. One, because now I was a Black girl in ESL. I didn't know English. And two, because, it's a culture shock. I wasn't exposed to a lot of the African iconic TV shows or culture that a lot of the people in school did. So I had to also learn a new culture, coming into the United States. So when I got a chance to contribute photographies, pictures of me growing up in Mexico and doing el danzón in Mexico in school, it was really a great opportunity for me to reflect the how it felt to be in a place where you don't fit that box, and then come into the United States and you're also don't fit the Black box. And And so we got a chance last year to go to Querétaro and be with my family and share pictures. And it really brought back those memories of why I am the way I am today, right? Why the identity matters, to make sure that both my African-American and my Latin culture roots come out. I had a chance to show my daughter, because my daughter was born here, but you know, she doesn't really understand the Latinx culture, right? The Afro-Latina culture. So having a chance for her to see people like her and I that look, you know, Black, but also speak Spanish, and being embraced by both cultures was so important to me. It was important to have an exposition where you have a variety of people of color that represent different communities, Mexicana, Puerto Riqueña, Cubanas, where, you know, we may all look on the outside, we're judged as you're Black, but we come with such a rich culture and history that makes us more than, you know, just our African root. So it was exciting to be able to see those, the pictures. It was exciting to be able to have the conversations with my mom and with our family and with my job. You know, this really came around right around the time when all the issues started to happening in our area, when we really start to talk about culture and diversity and what does it mean. And so it was a really good platform to have a diversity conversation, not only with our Anglo folks or Caucasian culture, but also with our African American culture and with the Latino culture, to really share about our differences. So it was exciting, and it was exciting to talk about how my mom and my dad met my mom in Mexico, and that's how I was born. Because a Black guy from South Carolina went to Mexico in the 70s to learn Spanish. So I'm excited, and I'm so thankful for the opportunity to share my experience.
Thank you, Janelle. It was so wonderful to work with you in this exhibition and to get to see your photos. Janelle has one of the photos that you might have seen on the Facebook page or on the website. It's of her at a dance when she's a small child, and it is a really, really sweet picture. As the lead curator, I felt so like honored and so privileged to be able to hear stories from different members of the community and to share like those vulnerable and painful moments, which I can relate to a degree, like that experience of having to choose which identity you're going to fit yourself into that day, and how you have to navigate feeling like you're not enough of one for the other. And it's, you know, it's a really, it can be a really challenging thing to navigate. And so I hope that this show provides a sense of pride for Afro-Latinx people who come to see it. And I hope that it really raises awareness for non-Black Latinx folks who come to see the show, that this community has always existed. Like Mikia said, it predates American colonialism, quite honestly. It predates the foundation of the US. And so why is this group still so underrepresented? You know, according to the Pew, a 2013 Pew poll, 25% of, what is it? Let me pull this up so I don't get it incorrect. But a quarter of US Latinx individuals identify as Afro-Latinx, and over half of Los Angeles is Latinx. So if you do the math, that's quite a few Afro-Latinx individuals that are not being represented on TV in a mainstream way, not being talked about as an ethnic group that has their own intersecting identities, their own needs, their own special considerations for what life is like on a daily basis. So the show breaks down both the history of this group in Los Angeles and talks about some of the contemporary realities that the group faces today. So each room, like the kitchen, we talked about how food made its way from Africa to Latin America and then has evolved into what we know as Afro-Latinx food today. And Lamika loaned us a cookbook, an Afro-Cuban vegan cookbook. And we also have a pasteles grinder from one of our other advisors whose family came here from Puerto Rico. But also in that room, we talk about food deserts and access to food. And so we try to balance some of the issues of the day with some of the history. And let's see, something that I forgot to mention earlier in regards to all of the partnerships we did. We also partnered with the California African American Museum on a joint exhibition that opened a week after our exhibition opened, so also unfortunately closed now. And that show is called Sula Bermudez Silverman, Neither Fish Nor Flesh Nor Fowl. And Sula is a Puerto Rican, Afro-Puerto Rican and Jewish mixed artist who creates art around the identities of, around the themes of home and identity. She makes really incredible work out of hair. And for this exhibition, she made a series of homes out of sugar. And so talking about some of like the industries that enslaved Africans were forced into working for. And so picking up those themes of diaspora and bringing that into her artwork. So on that note, let's see. Do we want to have our roundtable discussion? Is there anything that anyone wants to bring up before we watch the video walkthrough and do the Q&A?
Yes, I wanted to mention, so at La Plaza, I forgot to mention, we unfortunately do not have a permanent collection. And so we depend a lot on people to let us borrow their stuff. So we work with archives, with institutions and museums and private lenders. And so for this exhibition, this is why we had 3 collecting initiatives that was run through Mariah, and we had Mikia there, and we had a bunch of people come over. But also in many ways, this is where our social media too. This is how we got Janelle and other people to, you know, not donate to the museum directly. If they wanted to, they could donate to the Smithsonian or to Cal State LA. But in reality, we were asking for loans for the exhibition, and it was up to them if they wanted to. And so with La Plaza, since we don't have a permanent collection, we depend on borrowing from other people. And so we always let people know through our social media, or, you know, through word of mouth, or even through our advisors, which is why we need them so intensely, is because they're able to make connections for us. So there's also a way of, how do I explain it? A trust too, because I think also with people of color, you don't feel comfortable giving up not only your history, but also things that are very personal to you. And so this is our way of kind of bridging that gap of like, not only does La Plaza focus on Latinx issues, but we want to also represent that history. And so it was very important for us to push this through, and we will continue to do that because every exhibition that we do at La Plaza is constantly loans. So we hope that people are willing to share their story.
Thanks, Esperanza. Yeah, I think it was interesting and not surprising when you think about it that actually no one so far from our community lenders have opted to donate their objects or their photographs to Cal State LA or to the Smithsonian. And I think that speaks to the museum field at large and how there is a lot of mistrust between museums and people of color's history. And so we wanted to be super respectful of that. And so everything that is in the exhibition is a temporary loan, but we hope that this now has set kind of a precedent for folks from these communities who have been so underrepresented in archives and museum collections to feel like their stories will be told with dignity and with respect and with attention to being correct. And so hopefully in the future, they might think, okay, maybe I can donate these photographs, or I can donate this very precious object. One of my favorite objects that came through the collection days is a doll that was loaned to us by Esperanza Bandera. Her family, her mom is Mexican-American and her father was Afro-Cuban, and her grandmother lived in Cuba and gave her a doll that you'll see in the video that has very dark skin. And Esperanza's grandmother, Rafaela, gave her this doll so that she would have representation of Black people in her life. And as she said, come to love Black people. And when she shared that story with us at the collecting day, my heart broke into a million pieces, because as a non-Black person, that's not a thing that I'll ever have to deal with. I'm represented everywhere. And so stories like that came out of this process that really demonstrated how much trust we had to build. And I just think I'm so grateful that we were able to tell Esperanza's story and stories like Janelle's and like Lamika's to really help paint a broad, to help open people's eyes to how many lived experiences there are and how many different ways there are to be Afro-Latinx. There's no wrong way to be Afro-Latinx, and there's no wrong way to be Black. So it's there's so much to this that I really hope people get to take away from it. And perhaps this video walkthrough is the only way that you'll get to see the exhibition. You know, as Esperanza mentioned, they're hoping to extend. And so before we go over to the video, I want to turn it back over to Janelle and Mikia if there's anything else, any other history you want to drop on us or any other things you want to share.
I mean, I think this is just a great opportunity to bridge conversations, both within our communities and outside of our communities. For me, I was able to bridge the conversation at my job of what it means to be a woman of color, what it means to have a voice, what it means to be able to speak up. Because of my experiences growing up, going to a restaurant and being denied an application. They were saying, no, a esa mayata no le des una aplicación, don't give that. And it's a hurtful word. And I remember I demanded an application and I demanded that they gave me an interview. And that was when I was in my teens. And I demanded that I got a job. And this was at a fast food restaurant, so it wasn't no like fancy job, but it was racism within our own culture, that they didn't know that I spoke Spanish and that I understood what they were saying. And so sometimes we have to stay in these uncomfortable places and have these conversations that are uncomfortable to bridge change, right? We have to be able to, even sometimes within our own families or our own coworkers and in our own circles, have these relationships and these conversations to help talk about diversity, to share experiences that we felt, both in the past and even now that we still have to forge in the workplace and in our communities, so that we do have equal rights, so that we are treated with respect, right? So that we are giving voices to people who don't have voices. So it's a great opportunity. And I'd love to hear what Malika has to say.
No, I agree, Janelle. I think you took the words right out of my mouth, and I can relate to your experiences of being discriminated against, or, you know, people make, again, a lot of assumptions about you, and regardless whether I speak Spanish or not, no le importa, right? Like, I'm still a human being. Doesn't matter. I'm Black, and I'm proud to be Black, and I think people need to know and understand that. And I totally agree that right now, especially right now, as we see what's happening in the world around us, right? We're all having this conversation from our homes because we're in the midst of the pandemic. Mariah shared that she's in Portland right now, or not just right now, she moved to Portland at the end of the year. The global uprising against racism is, and especially against anti-Blackness, is like, it's like right there in her backyard, and it's in our backyard. It's something that we can't get away from until we confront it and actually address it. And I felt like this exhibit came at just the right time. It's so unfortunate that people can't go and see it in person because of the pandemic, but the conversations that it can start, and it has started, around racism, around colorism, around anti-Blackness globally, and in particular in the Latino community. I think we have to continue to have these conversations. We really need to be bold and shut it down, but then also have go deep with people, right? And ask why are people why do people have so many negative perspectives and stereotypes about Black folks? I mean, I think in the exhibit, we don't really go into that, right? Because it's supposed to be a safe space, it's home. So it doesn't go into that very much. We have the history to help increase awareness, but I think the next step here is to take that awareness and actually do something with it, right? What does it mean for me to really, wrestle with some of the comments that people make about my hair, or like Janelle's story, right? People will come up and touch your hair, or not just wrestle with that, but like how Black folks are not portrayed. I've been doing I'm a member of Black Lives Matter, and I'm a leader in Black Lives Matter here in LA. So I've been doing a lot of interviews and stuff on like Univision and Telemundo. And there's no representation. Like, we're just literally not there. My neighbors can point me out. They're like, we saw you on the news, because there's literally, like, you're the only person who looks like you on there. And it's not okay. So I just really want to encourage people to take the opportunity to go deeper in conversation and really think critically about what are the messages that have been told to you in your family, in the community, through the media, right? Who is missing from those stories, and why is it that folks who look like Janelle and I are constantly left out of the picture or portrayed in a negative light, right? And yeah, like move beyond that, move beyond the fear of having those conversations, because we have to, otherwise we're going to continue to see the types of issues that we see happening in the world around us. And Black lives, if Black people are not valued and people don't see us as mattering, then we're not going to be able to move forward as a society and as humans, like, honestly. So just want to put that out there.
One last point, just to close out, making sure census, that everybody is representing themselves in the census and voting.
Thank you, Janelle, and thank you, Lamika. Yeah, unequivocally, Black Lives Matter, period. That is one of, I hope, the takeaways of this exhibition. And so thank you both for being part of the exhibition. Thank you for sharing. I learn so much every time I speak to both of you. And so really I'm grateful that you're able to share your wisdom and your experiences and being vulnerable with us and with everyone on this program right now about what you've experienced. And I hope that with education and with awareness, we can start to break down some of that toxic thinking and start to not incrementally. Hopefully it's much faster than that, but we start to chip away at these thoughts, these thinking patterns that are so deeply ingrained in all colonial societies. And you can do more research on that history. You can explore some of the resources that we'll provide on the La Plaza website that will help you do a little further research. And so without further ado, we will do the video walkthrough of the exhibition, and then we will do a Q&A.
Estalla como una estatua de alas que se dispersan por la ciudad. Y el mediodía canta campana de agua de oro que nos prohíbe la soledad. Y la noche levanta su copa larga, su larga copa larga, luna temprana por sobre el mar. Pero para María no hay madrugada, pero para María no hay mediodía, pero para María ninguna luna alza su copa roja sobre las aguas. María no tiene tiempo, María Lando, de alzar los ojos, María de alzar los ojos, María Lando, rotos de sueño, María rotos de sueño, María Lando, de andar sufriendo, María de andar sufriendo, María Lando, solo trabaja, María solo trabaja, solo trabaja, solo trabaja, María solo trabaja y su trabajo es ajeno. no hay mediodía, pero para María ninguna luna alza su copa roja sobre las aguas. María no tiene tiempo, María Lando, de alzar los ojos, María de alzar los ojos, María Lando, rotos de sueño, María rotos de sueño, María Lando, de andar sufriendo, María de andar sufriendo, María Lando, solo trabaja, María solo trabaja, solo trabaja, solo trabaja, María solo trabaja y su trabajo es ajeno. Y su trabajo es ajeno.
Thanks, Abelardo. There's a 7-minute version of taking in the exhibition. As you can see, it's filled with warm colors and hopefully textures that remind you of an or that invoke an Afro-Latinx home. But we kept it slightly abstracted so that everyone could see a little bit of their home in the gallery. And so I'll just quickly explain what's in each gallery. I mentioned that in the kitchen, we talked about like traditional foodways and food deserts today. There's a very long timeline that goes from the transatlantic slave trade until 2020 and covers some prominent individuals in Los Angeles, but definitely not everyone. It also covers civil rights movements throughout Latin America and the United States, and the abolition of slavery in each Latin American country and in the US. And then opposite of that is a family hallway that we had photographs in, and then there was the kind of like ofrenda in the corner that had orishas on it, had some prayer candles, and had Mika's childhood prayer book. So trying to get at themes of diaspora, like religious affiliation throughout the diaspora and how there are different experiences with that. From there, there is a living room where we talk about representation in the media. And there's a video piece of a bolero singer. And so there, sorry, my dog just freaked out. That's life. Macy. Sorry, so sorry. That's life on Zoom in the pandemic. So there's media representation discussed in that room. We also have some vases on the mantle from local artist Wayne Perry. They're called Bodies of Work. They're spectacular. And then in the bedroom, we talk about representation and how you express yourself through clothing, through jewelry, through hair styling. And then there's artwork in there that talks a bit more about self-identity. And that's the room where we talk about anti-Blackness and about experiences like people touching your hair, or pelo malo talking about having bad skin or bad hair, and why that's harmful. And then from there, there's the coalition hallway where we had some historical photographs and that gorgeous quilt made by the Social Justice Sewing Academy that was made by a student after a trip to Cuba. And then the final room is the backyard where we talk about dance and play and expression through music. And so there's musical instruments that were on loan. And then there was also a video piece commissioned from artist June Canedo. And she did a series of interviews with Afro-Latinx teenagers talking about graduating from high school and entering college, and then paired that with a PBS documentary about students of the same age in Brazil and the discrimination that they faced in going to college. And then it rounds out with two drums, both from Mika's family. One is from Africa and one is from Puerto Rico, right? Cuba? Cuba and Ghana, right? Yes. Yeah. And the two drums are nearly identical. So rounding out the idea that these traditions are carried on in both places and throughout the diaspora. So yeah, awesome. So we'll...
I also want to mention that you also worked on a playlist with Walter to make sure, well, actually multiple playlists. So they would be in the kitchen. We also had it in the bedroom, and we had it in the backyard as well. And as you can see through the installation, we had not only a bunch of mirrors in the installation. We wanted to do that on purpose in order for people to not only read what they're reading about Afro-Latinos and their experience, but also kind of grapple with their own identity and how they view race as well, and how they deal with racism and prejudice even within the Latinx community. So we wanted to make sure that Afro-Latinx are being represented and shown in a good light.
Yeah, thank you, Esperanza. And those playlists are available on Spotify. We can provide the links to that after, so if anyone wants. And okay, so we have a couple Q&A questions already. Both from Stephen Meeks. Was composer LA-based Gerald Wilson and his wife Josefina and Elizabeth Catlett and her husband Francisco Mora mentioned, spotlighted? Also Renee Hall, who arranged Richie Valens' hit La Bamba. Unfortunately, none of those individuals were mentioned in the exhibition. Like I shared earlier, this was La Plaza's first foray into the Afro-Latinx community. And so we wanted to paint a broader picture without collapsing any one identity or focusing on any one person or neighborhood, because there is so much to cover and they all deserve their own exhibitions. But for this one, we had to trim some very important figures. So there's so much more to learn than what we covered in this exhibition. Thanks. Let's see, we have another question from Maria Concepcion. I believe this is for Janelle or Lamika, but how did you encourage yourself and where did you get your strength/inspiration? Maybe about in the face of discrimination? Not sure how you want, if you want to take those.
I think you get your strength from being knocked down, you know, and from having to pick yourself back up. We come from a background of luchadores. We're fighters. From the very time that we were brought in from Africa, we had to fight. We had to survive. We had to find a way. So watching my family, the women in my family open businesses, watching my mom come to the US and not speak the language and have to adapt. And myself having to push to open doors to have a seat at the table. I think you gather strength every time that door closes. You have to push a whole lot harder to make sure that door stays open, not just for yourself, but for other people.
Yeah, I would absolutely have to agree. Thank you so much, Janelle, for giving that picture of your family and the history. so eloquently, I would say absolutely drawing on the strength of ancestors, knowing that our people have been fighting from forever, right? And we're here, like we're actually here, right? That means that our folks made it. And I also draw my strength from my faith. So it's a combination of my faith, my ancestors, and not just my ancestors, but my elders too, because they have had to fight a lot of battles and they've knocked down a lot of doors. They were closed on them. They you know, pushed harder, opened them again, and then knocked them down so that I wouldn't have to worry about those. And I feel a responsibility to do the same thing for the generations after me. But I'm relying on their strength and my faith to be able to get me to, you know, be able to do that.
Thank you. Let's see, we have a couple more questions. One, will the exhibit still be up when the museum reopens? That is the hope. That is the TBD. You know, everything changes so quickly, and there's so many guidelines that shift and information that changes. So I think stay tuned to La Plaza's social media and their website to see if it will be extended. But I know that that is the curators on staff. That's their wish. That's my wish. I think that's everyone who was involved. That's their wish too. So fingers crossed. Okay, and then we have a question from Aaron, former senior curator at La Plaza. For the whole group, can you talk a little about how the Afro-Latinx community in Los Angeles differs from New York City or other areas, and any challenges you encountered in representing the Los Angeles Afro-Latinx experience? Who wants to, does anyone want to start with that? I can speak to it a little bit. The difference between Los Angeles and New York City, from what I learned, is that, like Mikia mentioned earlier, when you go to New York, you're meeting a lot of Dominicans, a lot of Puerto Ricans, a lot of Caribbean Afro-Latinx individuals and groups. So the difference in LA is that there are Caribbean Afro-Latinx folks in LA. There are also Peruvian, there are also Mexican, there are also like South and Central American, because geographically, like, that coast is closer and one is closer to the other if you're thinking about the US. And so we also have a lot of mixed individuals in LA that I'm sure there are in New York, but that's not like what comes to mind when you think of that community there. Whereas in LA, like, there are a lot of folks who have like one Latinx parent and one Afro-Latinx parent, or there's a variety of ways to do that, or that happens. And then any challenges we encountered in representing the LA Afro-Latinx experience. I think really just trying to capture all of it without collapsing any of it was the challenge. There are so many different stories that we could have told and so many different angles we could have focused on. And we tried to create a space where everyone could see themselves represented. And that's always a challenge because someone will get left out or feel not seen enough. And so balancing that representation without excluding anyone was the challenge that I experieed. But for that question is for the whole group.
I think one thing that I love what you had to say, Mariah, and I think that another thing that is difficult is the fact that the history of Latino people in LA has been erased so well. I mean, it's terrible to see that people don't know that Pio Pico, right? Pico Boulevard is named after Pio Pico. Who is Pio Pico? Did people know that he was a Black Mexican who was the last governor of the state of California before the US-Mexico war and the treaty, right? Like, he owned pretty much all of Whittier. Most people have no idea that this man was a Black man, right? That he was Mexican and that he had a lot of power and he was a prominent leader representing Mexico, like, as a country, right? Because he was in Mexico. And so I think because that history has been erased, because we don't learn about those things in the classroom, most people have no idea that like what Mariah said at the beginning, right? Pobladores were primarily Black folks. They were Afro-Mexicanos. And so not knowing that makes it very difficult for people to identify with and see that we've been here for longer than this place was the US, right? Longer than LA was the United States of America. We have been here from the beginning. And I think it's difficult to capture that when people don't understand that history. And for folks whose families' roots are in that, for them to not see themselves represented, they may not even know or realize, right? I just saw an article a couple weeks ago about the first Afro-Mexican, tamalera or something like that. Did y'all see that? There's a woman and her family. Yeah, I think it's amazing. And I thought to myself, that's incredible, but it's 2020 and I have a very difficult time believing that there is not a single other person who has sold tamales who was Afro-Latino. Like, I just don't believe that, but I'm going to go and support. I've been like sharing, you know, the article with people. I'm like, hey, we got to make sure we support our Afro-Latina folks. But again, not having that history, I think makes it very difficult to be able to tell the story completely because so much of it has been erased.
Yeah, thank you, Lamika. That's very true. And that was part of what I was getting at with the collecting days. Like this LA specific history has not been collected and has been erased. And so in La Plaza's primary history exhibition, LA Starts Here, we touch a bit on Pio Pico and we touch on the pobladores, but it doesn't really go beyond that. And so I know that that's something in the future La Plaza wants to incorporate more stories, highlighting Afro-Latinx individuals and other, all of the different ethnicities that can be Latinx as well. So thank you for that. And let's see, we have another question. This is about the collecting practices. So given that collecting institutions such as museums and libraries have fraught histories with communities of color, did you consider a non-extractive model rather than encouraging people to part with the materials that are so important to their heritage and donate them? Well, I apologize if I didn't make it clear earlier, but we didn't actually encourage anyone to part with anything. We made it very clear that we understood that there was that fraught relationship and that these are very precious objects and very personal objects. And so no one was pressured or encouraged to donate anything. Like Esperanza said, La Plaza is not a collecting institution. And so we made it very, very clear that everyone could have their stuff back and that any donation was totally voluntary. And so no one has donated anything. And we really didn't want to be extractive, but we wanted to offer the opportunity for someone to put their stuff in the record should they choose. So I hope that answers that. Let's see, and we have a question. Has the museum ever screened the film Blacktino? Not to my knowledge, but Abelardo can add it to the list. The museum does screen films and documentaries quite regularly. So hopefully there will be a steady rotation featuring a diversity of Latinx experiences after this. Any other questions? I think that might be it for Q&A. Yeah, Abelardo?
Yeah, that looks like it's it for the Q&A. However, there's been a lot of comments, and I'd like to just feature a couple. It's from Nicole Murphy. Thanks for this dialogue in the exhibition. I just turned 38 years old, and since I was a teenager, I've been wanting to see a connection with other Afro-Latino, Latinas as in LA. My mother is Mexican. Her father came from Mexico to the States when he was 14. My father is Black from Ohio. He settled in LA and met my mom, and the rest is history. We have, we asked where people were tuning in from. We have Teresa Aguilar, close by in Hollywood. We have from Grand Rapids, Michigan, Maria Davis. Thank you so much for joining in. Boyle Heights, Jania Mercado Valdez. Boston, Massachusetts, Lori Burenberg. We'll be posting all of these comments and questions. You see them on Facebook Live, on La Plaza's page. And that's pretty much wraps up our show. Thank you so much to the four of you for this wonderful presentation. I got to give some shout outs to our sponsors. This session of En Casa con La Plaza was presented in conjunction with LA Plaza's Afro-Latinidad, Mi Casa, My City exhibition program supported by the California Humanities through a Humanities for All project grant. You can go to our YouTube page or our website to view other En Casa sessions associated with the exhibition, including a conversation with Ebony Bailey, a documentary filmmaker focusing on Afro-Mexicanos, and a musical program called The African Influence on Latino Music, hosted by Beto Arcos. For En Casa con La Plaza, thanks to our sponsors, SoCal Gas, and again, California Humanities and the National Endowment for the Humanities, as part of the CARES Act, Coronavirus Aid, Relief and Economic Security, Economic Stabilization Plan. So thank you to those two groups. For all of you that tuned in, couldn't do this without you, both as viewers, but also as supporters. Think about becoming members. I'm putting our link on our chat here for the Zoom and also on Facebook Live. Just think about it. You'll be the first to know about a lot of our programs, including our upcoming sessions. This Friday, Mexican-American Pop Art with Nancy Sanchez, a singer-songwriter. That's at 7 o'clock. Next Monday, we have our La Plaza, En Casa con La Plaza Cocina. Every Monday at 3 o'clock, we have a cooking demonstration, a plática about Mexican Latino cuisine. Lola Dweck, a blogger who does a popular blog called Lola's Cocina, will be demonstrating breakfast, molletes, and agua fresca. And then next Wednesday, the return of Dr. Gloria Arjona out of Caltech, a lecturer, entertainer, and author, talking about Jose Posada's literary calaveras, the little known side of Jose Guadalupe Posada, creator of those iconic Dia de los Muertos imagery. And then next Friday, Dan Guerrero returns with his happy hour with special guest Edward James Olmos. So that does it for this session of En Casa con La Plaza. Please join us next time we're on. You could check out all of our videos, all of our sessions on our YouTube page at La Plaza LA, on our Facebook page at La Plaza LA, and our website, lapca.org. I'm going to ask everybody for a final goodbye while I do a screenshot of this historic panel. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.